left, right.
Yo, thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to SipTalk. Today we are talking about guns. And if you are watching in current time, there's been 2 episodes of some pretty extreme gun violence. And it's some heavy stuff. So James and I are discussing guns, discussing accessibility to guns. And I'd really like your opinion. So if you want to share some comments, if you want to shoot me a DM, I would love to hear more about your thoughts on guns and the current gun control laws. So thank you for tuning in, but take some time and be glad that you're safe and sound. This is Sip Talk. Grab a drink and enjoy.
Of course, let's go.
Cheers.
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 So this is episode 87 of Sip Talk. My name is Justin DiGiulio, joined by co-host James the Bosnator Boswell. James out of Charleston, South Carolina. What are you drinking?
Sticking with the Bush Ice. Until I move into the next house, it's going to be Bush Ice here on out.
All right, cool. Well, I mean, I respect the frugality while you're waiting to build up your greater bar in the new place.
I'm expecting to drop like $500 or $600 on my new bar.
I completely believe that. I'll make my drink in a minute. I've been dieting lately, so I'm making a low calorie option drink. We'll get there in a minute. Somewhat of a Cuba Libre. So today we're talking about guns, and we're going to get to guns pretty soon. Share our opinion on guns. I predict that our opinions are going to now. Anybody who's watching this, James and I, we've touched on guns a little before, but this is the first time we just decided we were going to talk about guns. We don't really know where we're going to fall on the gun line. Some crazy shootings over like the last week. You had Colorado yesterday, and then you had the one we talked about last week when we were talking about
Atlanta.
In Atlanta. That was like a week ago, right?
Might even be less.
Yeah, wow. So obvious some gun violence going on. That's what's going to carry us into
March 16th, so exactly a week.
Shit. Yeah, so 2 big shootings.
Every shooting.
they're big shootings. I mean, I don't know what qualifies a big shooting, but more than one person shot, lots and lots of bullets. So
I guess if an elephant gets shot too,
that would be a big shooting.
Yeah,
probably considerably fewer activists, but probably quite a few activists. So I got some notes here. I want to revisit the Asian hate thing because that's been driving me nuts, and just kind of hate in general. But you before we got online, you were talking about an article.
Well, this is on the topic of guns. And the DERV touched on this a little bit on Thursday, but the suspect in the Atlanta shootings from last week was able to buy the gun that he used in the shooting on the same day that he used the gun. There was no waiting period. He went into the shop, filled out some paperwork. They ran a background check on him. He passed, and he walked out of the store with a gun, probably within an hour.
Now, did David reference the abortion thing?
Yeah, where you can get a gun faster than you can get an abortion in Georgia,
which is wild. Yeah. I mean, these are big decisions.
Also,
guys.
You can get a gun faster than you can vote in Georgia. There's no same-day voter registration in Georgia.
I mean, so I feel like we do that a lot in society. We take one thing and then we pull it, we juxtapose it to something else that's not really related, and the legislation was written completely independently. But it is wild when you put 2 things side by side like that, especially when you're talking about big things.
It shows you where our priorities lie. And it says what is important to us.
Well, yeah, but also remember the different legislation is written at different times.
Doesn't matter.
Sure, but I feel like we're getting tighter and tighter. Like we're making it later and later to drink. later and later to smoke, things like that. But when it comes to firearms and I don't know. I mean, where do you fall when it comes to deciding what hoops you have to go through for anything? Do you think driver's license should be getting later? You think voting age should be getting later? You think drinking age should be getting later? Are we just constantly making it more difficult to get things?
Here's a general rule. The more dangerous an activity is, the more hoops you should have to go through in order to engage in it.
Well, but now how are you defining danger? Because then
pretty easy.
But then you're like, well, pretty easy in which way? You're talking violent danger. But somebody else who works for some type of rights group is going to argue how porn is dangerous and how you shouldn't be able to buy porn at 18. And I'm sure they're going to have a laundry list of convincing reasons and 1,000 people behind them with picket signs and sore throats and screaming.
Yeah, but it's a lot harder to make the case that porn is killing people when guns are actually killing people.
Sure,
and the same can be made about
but the argument would go along the lines of, sure, I guess you're keeping these people alive, but they're living fucked up sexual lives because they're sexual deviants because they're watching porn. And that's, we're in a Christian country and we shouldn't have naked people.
We're not a Christian country.
Well, but I'm sure the people arguing against porn are arguing that we're in a Christian country.
For the most part.
So, but I mean, I'm kind of playing devil's advocate. I have my own set of views on most of this stuff. And, I mean, I'm trying to, for the sake of the conversation, have it, I'd have to figure out each individual case where I land on things. But I think generally speaking, I'm pretty cool with the driver's license being 16. And then with experience, you get to drive like after 9 or whatever those rules were. That seems pretty reasonable.
I actually thought that the system that New York set up was pretty good.
Oh, that we went through it firsthand, and I felt like there were a lot of barriers and limited gradual steps for us to be behind an automobile independently. Mm-hmm. And then with passengers, because you're not allowed to drive with passengers right off the bat.
I think you are. I think it was that it was what times you could drive, or like you couldn't drive after 9 unless you were going like to or from work or something like that.
To or from
and
work,
you couldn't drive out of state. Like if you had the Class DJ license, it was like you could only drive to school or work after 9, and you couldn't leave the state. And then once you turned 17, if you had the DJ license, it would be automatically upgraded to a D, and you could basically drive without restrictions.
So you can drive at 16, and then you get experience, and you can. Wait, I missed the last part because I was thinking about the next.
I'm pretty sure that so you can get your learner's permit on the day you turn 16.
Yeah,
and then you can pretty much register for a road course for the road test pretty much immediately, but it's probably a bad idea to do so until you've had some chance to drive with the learner's permit with a licensed driver guiding you.
Yeah.
But you could, in theory, probably take your road test the day after your birthday. Probably not going to pass it, but you could.
Yeah.
And then from age 16 until 17, or it might be that you have to hold the license for a year. I don't remember. It's been too long.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
That's what
my question was.
But at some point you get you age out of the DJ license, and
whether that's after a certain number of driven hours or after a year. I don't
they have no way of tracking hours, but I'm pretty sure that you can't get the DJ license before 17. That's just a hard stop. But it might have been you could get, I think it was, if you had taken a driver's ed course, then you could get the D license at 17. And if you you didn't take the driver's ed course, you got the D license age 18.
That might make sense. Yeah, but I like the gradual steps. So then you get, actually, I want to talk about the motorcycle. Well, we got to get back into guns in a second. And then I'm going to make this low calorie.
How long did we last?
I know we're bad with this. And then I'm going to make this low calorie cocktail that's fitting in with my diet. But on the motorcycle license is an interesting one, because when you get the motorcycle permit, it's more difficult to drive a motorcycle with a passenger. So with the motorcycle, you can't
just have somebody on the back saying, "Don't do this."
Yeah. So you get the motorcycle permit in a written test, And then you're allowed to drive around on the motorcycle with no one else on the motorcycle, which is the safer of the options. But you have to be within a half mile of a licensed rider. Which, I mean, that makes sense that you have a licensed person around you, but still, you can be out in the open road having never driven a motorcycle before. So I think it's a very weird difference between driving a car where you have the licensed person in the car.
Yeah, South Carolina does it a little differently.
Well, when I lived in South Carolina, they were transitioning from if you had a driver's license, you could drive a motorcycle, to you needed a separate motorcycle license.
Yeah, here you have two options. You either take a motorcycle training course, which they offer at like the community colleges or wherever. It's like $400 for a weekend, and you get to drive their motorcycles and practice a couple things. And at the end of that, if you pass, which probably everybody does, then you basically get a certificate that you can send into the DMV, and they'll upgrade your license. The other option is you can go and take a road test for your motorcycle license.
Yeah, same in New York. And yeah, pretty much everyone passes that test in the class.
Yeah, that's what you're paying for. You're paying for the certificate. They're not in the business of failing people.
It's a license exam waiver course. All right, so I've been really trying to watch what I've been drinking lately in terms of additional calories, and I've decided that pretty much since Joe Biden became president and coronavirus started going away the same day, that I have to get my diet back on point and obviously just get back in general good shape, because when gyms were closed and I didn't have a decent workout set up at home, working out was basically impossible. When they opened gyms and I would have to stand on the sidewalk for 40 minutes waiting to go into the gym. That's not, you can't schedule a workout in when you may have to wait standing on the sidewalk. So now that life's pretty much back to normal for me, started working out, decided I got to start eating healthy. So I'm really trying to limit the alcohol consumption. Obviously this is SipTalk, and I was going to have a regular cocktail tonight, but I thought I'd share this interesting cocktail. When I'm not drinking, it's one that I'll make, or some nights when I've had a little too much and I got to scale back on the alcohol, rather than drink water, I'll make myself a mocktail. So here's the mocktail. It's diet cola. And I'm going to make a mock Cuba Libre here. So, and since it's diet, I'm adding quite a bit. You still drink a lot of soda, James?
No.
Well, I mean, good for you. I know you're definitely not a fan of diet soda. So, and then I got a lime here. Nice fresh lime. One thing about having a bar at home is always keeping some mixers on hand. And
the problem with fresh ones is like they don't last very long. If you have like fresh squeezed juice or whatever, it might last at best 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, but what I do with lime is every time I go to the grocery store, I just grab a couple and I put it in water or something. After dinner, I'll have a glass of ice water with some lime in it. So I run through them pretty regularly. And then when we have a bunch of people over, I'll grab some extras. So I got lime, Diet Coke, and I've got some bitters. It seems like the cap is glued on here. A couple of bitters and some ice. And that's it. It tastes almost like a rum and Coke. Minus a little bit of added sweetness and depth from any rum. But it's a great mocktail. And if you're really trying to pretend that you're drinking a drink, and you just kind of make it yourself, no one's going to have any idea that you're not drinking a actual cocktail. So cheers to your Busch Ice. Oh, that's good. And the bitters actually make it taste like a cocktail. So I thought I'd share that with people.
I'll have to come up with a couple recipes for non-alcoholic drinks that are good.
Yeah, I mean, it's I definitely, I mean, obviously I prefer alcoholic beverages, but on occasion it's nice to have something with no alcohol in it. And honestly, in terms of trying, like I've been, rather than using anything with sugar in it lately, I've been using this is a mix. And I'm done with that. That really wasn't very good, especially with the seltzer water.
We tried to tell you.
Yeah, I know. So let's get into some other things that are weird barriers of entry, because I want to segue into it being a little too easy to buy guns. But they just increased the smoking age, or the age in New York where you can buy tobacco products, to 21.
Same down here, actually.
Which I mean, I don't know. I feel like at 18, I would probably have been more likely to buy cigarettes than I would at 21. But I was never compelled at 18 nor at 21 to buy cigarettes. But I mean, 21 is like, you're full on adult. It's I get what they're trying to do, but I don't like that 21-year-old mark. Same thing with alcohol consumption. I feel like at 18, if you're out of the house, like, you should be able to have kind of free reign to buy whatever you want. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the age for both of them is stupid.
What do you think it should be?
Probably 18. I look at it as 18 is kind of our threshold for what we determine to be legally an adult.
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
So if you're going to have all the rights and responsibilities of an adult, particularly the responsibilities, where you commit a crime, you're going to be tried as an adult, and you can be drafted at age 18. You can vote at age 18. Why do we have this other category of adulthood that you have to wait 3 years for?
Well, it's because the people on the north side of that threshold are the ones that are making the rules.
Yeah, but like, I'm on the other side of 21, and as soon as I turn 21, it's not like, oh, screw all you guys, you got to wait 3 more years. I'm like, why are we doing this? Why are we holding on to something that makes no sense?
Well, my thinking is, I feel like you and I were having drinks before we were like 18, before, like, when we were like 15, 16 years old. We were having a little bit of wine. We were making,
lots of people were
I feel like a lot of people weren't. I mean, I feel like there's also a lot of people that have locked themselves in solitude for the last year because of coronavirus. People that are like following laws to the T, the kind of people that don't do 56 on the highway, which, if you've ever been on a highway, you know there are people that don't go over 55. So there's a lot of people that really follow the rules. But I feel like the way that we were introduced to alcohol is probably similar to a lot of European countries and a lot of the greater rest of the world, where it's not criminalized. Obviously, there are some barriers to buy things because they are, to a degree, a controlled substance, but it's just not that withheld and dangled in front of you for so long that you have this pent up desire to buy something and experiment with it.
Well, it's not treated as something special. It's not. You don't have this whole forbidden fruit aspect to it. Now, that's not to say that during my time in Spain, I didn't see a whole bunch of like 15 and 16-year-olds just stumbling down the street because they had too much at a bar. That happened all the time. But
really?
Oh, yeah.
Can you, if you don't mind sharing, tell the story of the first time you get drunk?
No, the one I threw up on the keyboard? And I'd been drunk before, but that was different. I honestly don't have that much memory of it, and I'd rather not tell the story.
Okay. But that story went through my head the other day. I don't remember where it came from, but just that you, well, I mean, I wasn't going to tell the story, but you got drunk, you threw up on the keyboard, as you said. And then
the next morning I had to drive and buy a new keyboard.
Your parents made you buy a new keyboard.
Yeah,
so
that was my punishment, is you're going to drive 30 minutes one way, hungover as fuck, and you're going to buy a new keyboard.
Oh, man.
Because you destroyed the other one.
Destroyed is right. Well, yeah, I mean that's the essence of the story there.
I don't remember any of that though. I was beyond blackout.
Yeah, well, I mean, and you were young. So look, we got tobacco products, which they just increased the age. We have porn, which is 18. We have alcohol, which is 21. And we have driving, which is 16/17. I think some states.
South Carolina, I think you can get your learner's permit at 15.
I think some states in the South are 15, or at least I remember my cousins in Florida being able to drive with a permit, I think at 15. What else is there controls on? Is it so? I assume I don't know anything about buying guns, but I assume it's
So
18.
I'm pretty sure that most states you can buy a gun at 18, and then some states have restrictions as to what types of guns you can buy at 18. So you might be able to buy handguns at 18, but not buy long rifles or hunting rifles until 21.
I would think the opposite. Think
I don't
handgun.
look. I don't know. Every state's different, but there are definitely states that restrict certain types of gun purchases to 21 and up.
Yeah. All right. Just somebody asked the cost of cigarettes in New York, and it's $13 a pack. I just looked that up.
Well, it's like
How much?
it's about $7 a pack down here.
Wow, that's wild. You could double your profit.
Like $7 to $8. It depends on which brand you're buying and everything else, but figure about $7 to $8 a pack.
Yeah. So, what does a gun cost? I don't have any idea what a gun costs. I would
Well,
guess
it
like
ranges
$200.
wildly. I'd say your cheapest handguns you could probably get for like $200 to $300. I'd say your average handgun's probably going to be like between $500 and $800, and then some of the higher end pistols would be like $1,000 to $2,000. And then you can get into like specialized stuff. But like if you're talking about kind of an off the rack gun, depending on the brand that you're buying and everything, figure between $200 and $1,500, depending on the manufacturer and what it's chambered for.
So that would be like your Honda Civic of guns, like the everyman's gun.
The classic example is like a Glock 19, which is going to be just the standard 9mm Glock, and those are probably about $500 or $600. That's what a lot of police carry. But if you wanted to get like a cheap like 38 revolver or something, you could probably get one of those for like under $300, because engineering wise they're extremely simple.
A revolver, yeah.
Whereas like a semi-automatic handgun has a lot more moving parts, is a lot more complex mechanically. And then for more expensive ones, like I don't own a gun and I don't intend to, but if I were to buy a gun, I'd probably want to get the 5.7 pistol, which is kind of an exotic chambering, and that's like about $1,500.
Fuck. All right. I mean, that's a lot of money, but if you can get so the guns we're mostly talking about though are semi-automatic, meaning you don't have to cock them. You pull the trigger and a bullet comes out.
Mm-hmm. Even revolvers are semi-automatic.
Yeah, and that's what. So, and then what's one step below that? What is it called?
Generally going to be like a bolt action or something. No pistol at this point is going to be bolt action. That just doesn't make sense. You're going to either get a semi-automatic pistol, which is usually going to be like a gas blowback spring-driven design, where some of the energy of the bullet. So most of the energy of the bullet goes down the chamber and pushes the bullet out, but some of that gas is redirected back to put enough energy to cock the hammer back and also cycle the next round up.
Yeah.
And so you've got various mechanisms between gas blowback or like a spring mechanism, but whereas a revolver is when you pull the trigger cocks the hammer back and also releases the hammer, but part of your energy of pulling the trigger also cycles the chamber.
Turns the chamber. So revolver has a revolving circular chamber of bullets, whereas what's the other one called?
Semi-automatic will have a magazine where the bullets are loaded into a spring-loaded magazine that pushes the next round up.
Exactly.
Now,
and how many
action? Go ahead.
How many bullets are typically in a revolver versus a regular handgun magazine? 6 to 10.
Rarely are revolvers going to have more than 6. There's a reason why it's called a 6-shooter.
I guess that makes sense. It sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, because it's awkward to have like an 8-round. Like it's just bigger, because you can't, like with a magazine, you're gonna have like a clip that, and then the bullets can just kind of stack. Whereas like a revolver, they have to go around in a circle, and the more you want to have, the bigger the circle has to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could have like a 30-round revolver, but it's gonna be like it's gonna look ridiculous.
It makes me think of like a Tommy gun from
No, those are
like
drum magazines.
Dick Tracy.
So those are drum magazines, which work on the same concept as a clip or a clip is actually different. A lot of people call things clips when they're actually magazines, but the magazine is just you've got like here's your magazine and you've got a stopper at the bottom that's spring loaded. So the spring pushes it up and you put in bullets and it just notches down a little bit. So
it's like a Pez dispenser for bullets.
Exactly. Okay. And so a drum magazine works the exact same way, except inside the drum it's spiraled. So imagine a spiral Pez dispenser instead of straight up and down. And that's what a drum magazine is. You can also have belt fed, and that's when you think of like the machine guns that are on like the side of helicopters or wherever. You've just got a box of bullets that feeds a belt through, which are really high capacity, but they're not something that you like are easily going to be carrying around, so nobody uses them.
So these are semi-automatic, meaning you pull the trigger once.
Pull the trigger once, you get one bullet. You hold down the trigger, you still only get one bullet.
Mm-hmm. And the next step up is an automatic weapon where you hold the trigger down, and the longer you hold it down, the more bullets come out.
Until there's no more bullets.
And that would be very useful if you were trying to take down warthogs in the Sahara. Or what would be the other reason you would use that?
Well,
domestic terrorism.
Yeah, but even then, automatic fire, the problem with automatic fire is that recoil is if you're just holding something down, it's really hard to keep the gun steadily aim something at anything really. So
fire hose effectively.
Pretty much. So even in automatic weapons, most trained gunmen will not fire fully auto until the magazine is out. Most will probably fire in like a burst of like traditionally like 3 to 5 rounds at a time, because that's enough for that to put some ammo down range, but not lose control of the gun. So the only time that you really see in practical effect automatic weapon fire used is for suppression. Like
suppression of what?
So if you've got multiple people that so let's say you're in the middle of a battle in war and you know the enemy's hiding somewhere and you're also taking cover or whatever, and you don't want the enemy to move from where they are, then you use suppressing fire to discourage them from moving. Where they're constantly
your aim is very bad. You're scaring.
You're honestly not even trying to hit them. You know that your bullets aren't going to hit them, but you're going to make them know that as soon as they come out from cover, they're likely to get hit, so they stay under cover. So you use suppressing fire to keep the enemy from being able to move out to see you, while you reposition to get a better angle on the enemy to flank them and get a shot before they can react.
Now let me ask this: I have an odd relationship to guns because I know nothing about them. And what I learn, I quickly forget because I'm just not using that information. But is it any more difficult to get your hands on an automatic weapon in the U.S.?
Vastly more difficult.
Okay. Now, the guys that did all this shooting the 2 different guys that did the shooting over the last week, what type of weapons were they using? Do you know?
The Atlanta shooter used a pistol of some sort. I don't know exactly what kind. It was a 9mm pistol, which 9mm is probably the most common chambering for handguns in this country because it's inexpensive. It has low recoil. It's very easy to find, and it's pretty effective unless somebody's wearing body armor, and most people aren't.
Yeah, isn't that very difficult to buy?
No.
I'm pretty sure that they're making body armor illegal in some places.
Maybe.
Like bulletproof vests.
As far as I'm aware, there's not that many restrictions on buying bulletproof vests. And bulletproof vest is kind of a misnomer because it's not like if you get shot when you're wearing a bulletproof vest, you're just like, oh, you're fine. You still got shot, and
you still have something that's going. How fast does a bullet go? 400 miles an hour?
No, faster than that. Most bullets are supersonic. I think most handguns travel at about 1,800 feet per second, and like hunting rifles are probably between like 2,500 and 3,000 feet per second, which I should do the calculation.
Yeah.
Per second.
I'm like 400 miles an hour sounds fast.
All right. Let's do 1,700 feet. Yeah. Okay. Cool. That makes sense. So at 1,700 feet per second, that's about 1,150 miles an hour. Supersonic is like 767 or so, or 744.
Supersonic means you're breaking the sound barrier.
Let me see what a 9mm muzzle velocity is. 1,246 feet per second. So let's do that. So that's 850 miles an hour, which is still supersonic. Let's do a common rifle chambering.
So the bullets are fucking flying fast. Very fast.
So a 30-06, which is a really common hunting rifle round, is about 2,800 feet per second. So that's 1,900 miles an hour. It's pretty fast. It's pretty rare. Not many people fire subsonic rounds.
Would there be any additional utility of a slower bullet?
Subsonic rounds aren't going to have the sonic boom created by the bullet. So if you're looking to use a suppressor, so this is where movies are really bad. Is in movies, if someone has a silenced pistol or whatever, it just sounds like pew pew, like a little sneeze or something. Whereas in reality, if you fire a suppressed pistol with a supersonic round, it still sounds like a gun. It's just the difference between if you're not wearing hearing protection and someone fires a silenced pistol relatively close to you, it'll still be loud, but you're not going to, like, your ears aren't going to hurt. Whereas if you're firing a regular pistol in like an indoor environment or whatever, you're going to have hearing damage really fucking fast. So, because the noise from a bullet comes from two things. The first is the gas expanding out of the barrel and it's an explosion. So a silencer takes care of that because it allows the gas to expand slower and it's no longer an explosion. It's like the difference between stabbing a car tire with a knife and it explodes versus letting the air out by just pressing the nozzle.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's not a great example.
That's not a very good example, but I understand.
But you're letting the air out of the barrel more slowly, so that it doesn't pop.
Yeah, so that's vastly different, but yeah.
And then the other sound from a gun is the sound of the bullet breaking the sound barrier. So yeah, go ahead.
We're in talking about speed because we got away from this. We're talking about bulletproof vests, and what you said is a bulletproof vest doesn't make you invincible.
Oh no!
When you get hit by a bullet, rather than it piercing a small area, the fabric of the bulletproof vest, and it's not fabric, it's layers of whatever, Kevlar, whatever.
Yeah, there's a variety of vests. So some are just going to be Kevlar and several layers or whatever. The heavier ones are going to be Kevlar with maybe some like steel or iron plating or something.
Yeah.
Those are way heavier and harder to wear and move around, but they're obviously going to provide more protection.
But point is, it's impenetrable
no.
for the most part, and it takes that single point of impact and it spreads it out. But either way, it's like being punched, except I don't know how fast a punch might go, but at 900 miles an hour. Are you Googling how fast a punch is?
No.
Oh, you should, because I'm curious how fast a punch is. And they're not all fully impenetrable, but it's definitely slowing that bullet down, and in certain cases, keeping it from going all the way through you or from bouncing around within you to entering at a slower rate. What are you searching? I'm curious. I see you Googling.
Muzzle energy of a 9mm bullet, and I'm trying to figure out how to compare it to something that's a little bit easier to understand, because it's measured in joules, and that's basically just going to be like kinetic energy is 1/2 mass times the velocity squared. So mass and speed equal kinetic energy. And I want to figure out, I think a good comparison would be if you're wearing your regular body armor and someone shoots you with a 9mm or whatever, like the body armor is going to make it so that the bullet doesn't go through you. But it's the vest still has to absorb that energy, and that energy has to go somewhere. The bullet's still going this way, so it spreads out. And I think it would kind of be like if someone threw a fastball and you got pegged by like a 90-mile-an-hour fastball wherever that bullet went. And the other thing is,
and getting hit by a baseball is insanely painful.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that people don't really pay attention to is if like a bulletproof vest takes one bullet, like then if you get one shot here and then like another shot here, this second shot is going to be much more likely to do a lot more damage because the fibers already got stretched because of the first one. So now they're not going to be able to do the same kind of work. So if you get shot multiple times in a bulletproof vest, each shot is going to do more and more damage, with the likelihood that it's going to penetrate and kill you going up exponentially with each shot.
Yeah. So it doesn't turn you into a superhero, is the point. But I think we're losing some direction here. I think what we probably want to get into is a bit more of gun control, and I feel like that's going to be the topic. It's going to be more than a fastball. It's going to be about 5 times more energy than a 90-mile-an-hour pitch. Okay, so getting hit by a fastball times 5. Yeah, which I thought the fastball seemed a little low in my opinion, because it will break ribs. You can break bones, but even through a bulletproof vest. But where I was going was, I feel like over the next week, because we have such a liberal administration right now, we're going to hear a lot on gun control.
As we should.
Sure. But also there's going to be a lot of pushback on it. And we're where everything is just kind of hyper extreme right now. So I feel like there's a really good chance 2 big shootings within 1 week, and a liberal administration is very likely to cause some new legislation, some gun reforms. Again, I think a lot of the gun reform, and that's why I was asking questions like, what were the guns that were being used in these shootings? But
the one that happened yesterday, I don't know yet. The news is still kind of coming out.
Yeah. But there's so much news against automatic weapons and reducing the amount of bullets that can be held in an automatic weapon clip. And if we come to find out that there weren't automatic weapons used, there's going to be some other things. Obviously, the wait period between when you can buy a gun and when you want to buy a gun.
Here's the thing about semi-automatic rifles. So AR-15s, which are M16 variants of various sorts, are going to be chambered in .223, and they don't have that much recoil. And most of them are going to have magazines of like 20 or 30 bullets. And since instead of having one hand to absorb the recoil, you've got a bigger weapon that naturally is just going to resist movement more. So the recoil is absorbed partially just by the body of the gun, but also most people will have that holstered on their shoulder and have one hand on the trigger and the other hand on the barrel of the gun to stabilize it. And the difference between a semi-automatic and an automatic rifle is really just how much work your fingers have to do. It doesn't affect the rate of fire. Anybody who has any practice with semi-automatic weapons can probably squeeze off almost as many rounds as if the weapon were automatic. It just means that they have to do more work with their fingers instead of just holding it down.
Yeah, and just an automatic weapon, for the most part, doesn't shoot at super rapid fire. The bullets still have to enter the chamber and be expelled through the chamber, which I just remember from playing paintball, that's a very slow process because the paintballs need to enter the chamber and it can't fire before the paintballs fully entered the chamber. Otherwise, it will break the paintball and your gun will pretty much get clogged.
Okay,
now,
so rate of fire on an M16, which is similar to the AR-15 or whatever, is between 45 to 60 rounds per minute.
So it's a little less than a bullet a second. So if you're shooting
in semi-automatic, all right, Never mind. So it's 700 to 950 rounds per minute, sustained automatic fire. So that's really
700 rounds per minute. Okay, so
yeah, but that's
I
if
was
you had like
wrong.
a belt feeding or something where like you didn't have to worry about running out of ammunition. But in reality, so 700 to 950 rounds per minute. Let's call that 12 rounds per second, which is pretty fast. But you can get up to about that speed with your fingers. You might be able to get to 8 to 9 per second with your fingers.
Once you get the timing down.
Yeah.
But,
and that's pretty average. I'd say about 10 per second for an automatic weapon is about the average. There are other guns that fire closer to 15 or whatever.
So I'm just going to catch up real quick in the comments from Instagram right here. Cheryl is saying that he bought an AR-15 and they're still trying to figure out where from. But I think just the availability of them, the availability of guns and the ease and where you buy them is probably the biggest issue. When I get into gun debates with people, I just pose the simple question: would the world be, now these are two different sides of the spectrum, but would the world be a safer place would there be more or less gun violence if everyone had a gun versus if no one had a gun?
That's an easy question to answer.
Duh, exactly. But then the person usually replies, yeah, but there are already guns out there and you can't take them away from people. Sure, but is the solution to make things safer arm everyone or arm as many people as possible? And that's kind of the counter argument to everyone being armed, more guns being issued to people. And
here are the flaws with that argument.
What, arming people?
Everybody?
Yeah.
The flaws to that argument is that in a situation where someone is trying to shoot people, like a bad guy has a gun. Well, when they start shooting and somebody else pulls a gun on them in a chaotic situation, it's very easy to lose track of who the bad guy is and who the good guys are. Because when everyone has a gun, how are you going to know which person you're supposed to shoot? It's not as simple as in a video game where the bad guy's wearing red and everybody else is wearing blue. So it's not a, and also most people, even gun owners, don't have the same level of training as law enforcement officers or military police or soldiers in terms of their accuracy with the weapon and their discipline with the weapon. So if you have a whole bunch of amateurs trying to exact justice on their own, they're much more likely to miss and shoot an innocent bystander, let alone compounding how difficult it is to identify the person you're actually trying to shoot. That's hard for a trained law enforcement officer.
I'll run a scenario by you. All right. There's an active school shooter on a school campus. We'll call it a middle school. And there happens to be someone who's armed and carrying a weapon on the staff in the middle school. And the police get called. And the police raid the building. And the armed staff member is now trolling the halls trying to find the active shooter. Well, guess what happens? The police show up. They don't know the armed staff member from the next guy, and they take down the armed staff member. And chances are they're probably not going to announce themselves and try to talk the guy down. He's been shooting middle schoolers, so they're just going to aim and fire on him. And now you have one good guy down. And it's that's kind of my point. Yeah, it's you make a very good point. But making guns more available is obviously a very flawed argument. And then making guns harder to get, to me, just makes more sense. Especially being able to buy a gun the same day. And we talked about comparing it to abortions. I don't know very much about abortions, but I do know that in most of the states, if you want one, you go and you get basically a consultation, and they don't just tell you, all right, take your pants off and lean back, we'll take care of this.
Most of them, it's a 24-hour waiting period at the minimum.
They educate you. They tell you what your options are.
Educate you.
Well, some places educate you, like basically telling you for God's sake, you have to keep the child. And then they send you home to think about it. And you're already in an emotional state because you found out you're pregnant, which one does a lot to you psychologically, but also you probably have different hormones going on in your body.
You're also in the process of making one of the most difficult decisions in your life. Yeah, nobody goes into an abortion saying, I've been waiting for this day to come.
Exactly. But then you have someone who's buying a gun. Now, if they're in an emotional state trying to buy a gun, that's probably a bad thing. Now, if they're not and they just want to buy a gun, then they can wait. They can wait. Go ahead.
Let me ask like kind of the counter to this question, which is, in what situation do you ever have, what situation could ever present itself where you must be able to buy a gun the same day? When does that happen? Give me a good example of when you have to have a gun this very day.
I can't think of one. I can't think of one.
Name a situation that exists that wouldn't be any different if you had to wait 2 or 3 days. I can't think of one. What good reason do you have to buy a gun and you say, I need it right now, I need it in an hour?
Yeah, I mean,
the only time that I can think of is if you've got someone who's threatening your life, you're like, my ex-boyfriend is stalking me and I feel that he might shoot me or something like that, then your situation should be, I'm going to the police and I need protection. I need to have the law protect me because that's what the police are there for. But they actually do a pretty good job with that.
Sure, but you know, the person pursuing you might say, if you go to the police, then I'm really going to kill you. And then you go to the police and they're like, all right, write this report and give us a call if anything happens. And send you home.
That points out some other flaws in our domestic violence system. But my point is that, like, by being able to buy a gun in the same day, what problem is that solving?
Yeah, I don't know. If you need something that badly, then
there's probably other solutions available that you should consider.
Yeah, and you know, whatever's driving you may not be something rational. Like, it's not like you saw a deer off in a field on the side of the highway and you're going to go to a store, buy a gun and come back.
That deer will still be there in an hour, man.
Well, so look though, that reminded me of a story of a friend of mine who you know. I won't shout out any names, but this is also one of my favorite stories that I remind him of all the time. He saw, it was probably like 6 years after he was in high school, and he saw his high school crush, this girl he had a huge crush on, at a gas station.
There's only one person this can be.
So no, I don't think it's who you're thinking. Maybe a very close relative of that person. But saw a girl he had a huge crush on at a gas station. He'd been like doing some work on the car or something, so he was filthy. So rather than pull into the gas station, pretend to get some gas or buy a carton of milk or something and say hi, he went home, took a shower, changed his clothes, and went back to the gas station, and then called me and said, "Shit. You wouldn't believe what just happened. I just saw the girl of my dreams." And she was pumping gas. So I raced home. I took a shower, changed my clothes, and came back, and she was gone. And I was like, dude, what? No matter how fast you went, like she had 12 gallons to pump, and she was out of there. Like,
does his name start with an S?
It may. Okay. But yeah, but instantly my head went there when you were trying to say, name a scenario where you need a gun immediately. I was like, when you see a deer in a field and you want to go to the store, buy a gun, and come back and shoot the deer, I guess. All right, look,
there's one other scenario. So right. So we've talked about, like, should we make guns more available? And we both come down on the side of no. Should there be a waiting period? Yes. I had this argument with some coworkers of mine who were very much on the side of guns rights and guns should be available. Mm-hmm. I believe this was 2 years ago. I think I might have told the story on the stream a while back, actually. But 2 years ago, there was a mass shooting in Ohio. And it happened at night, where the city had one of those blocks that they closed down like 2 or 3 blocks and the bars open. You can walk on the streets and everything, and people can just go from bar to bar, right?
Yeah.
So this guy takes an Uber with a gun, apparently.
That's the thing about rifles. I don't know how people carry around these rifles and people are
whatever the case is, he had an AR-15 or similar and he brought it with him to this area of the town that was shut down for parties or whatever that night. And so there's a lot of people in the area, densely packed. He gets out of the Uber, walks to wherever he thinks he's going to be able to do the most damage, and opens fire. So, do you know how long it took for police to respond to him?
I would assume pretty quickly. Usually those areas have a decent amount of police there.
Yeah. So in number of minutes, how long did it take police to get to him?
1 minute.
Pretty close. It was less than a minute.
Okay.
It was less than a minute for police to hear the sound of gunfire, respond, shoot, and kill him. I think it was like 45 seconds or something.
So what are you saying, though?
The point that I'm making is he managed to kill 9 people in the time that it took police to respond. And I don't think you can ask anything more from police than a 45-second response time. That's really good.
Well, if we defund the police.
Different argument. We're not going there.
No, but point is, it's not helping the cause.
But what I'm saying is the police responded about as quick as you could ever expect them to respond. They did everything right. And the guy still managed to kill 9 people.
Yeah, that's insane.
If he had a lower magazine capacity or a less powerful weapon at his availability, would he have killed some people? Probably. Would it have been 9? Probably not. So the question, and I asked the guys, I said, how can we justify letting people have these kind of weapons? And they were both hunters. And I said, would you ever take one of these kind of weapons on a hunt? And they said, no. I said, why? They said, because the way that the bullets are designed for that kind of a weapon, they're not good for killing an animal because they will overpenetrate and they'll leave the animal wounded, but the animal will be able to get away. And the whole idea with hunting is like, you're not supposed to cause suffering to the animal. You want to kill the animal as quickly as possible so it doesn't suffer. And the kind of bullets that are in an AR-15 are .223, which are really, really actually small caliber, but they're very fast and high energy. And they're designed to yaw and wound. And I said, would you ever take one of those kind of weapons on a hunt?
The answer is no. And right. It's very difficult to make an argument that you can have all guns immediately just because you want them, just because the Second Amendment says so.
If you restrict magazine capacity, because changing a magazine takes 5 to 10 seconds, maybe a little bit less if you're experienced, but it's still time that you're not shooting people. And so if instead of having a 20 or 30 round capacity or more, if you're limited to 10, then that's a lot more time that people have to escape. That's a lot more time for the police to respond.
Look, I think we both know how we feel on gun ownership and availability of guns. My thinking for myself, the reason I don't have a gun is because I would use it. When I hear a noise in the middle of the night, rather than creep to the door or consider grabbing a baseball bat or something, I would just grab a gun and then creep to the door. And I would be much more likely to use that gun in a moment of shock than I would if I did not have a gun. And if I had a baseball bat, I'd be much less likely to kill someone than I would with a gun. But I think if you have it, you'll use it. And it's funny because I think we talked about this in the last episode or maybe the episode before. If you give a man a hammer,
everything looks like a nail.
Yeah. I'm getting a freaking call here. Everything looks like a nail. And I've been thinking about that phrase a lot because I've been listening to a radio station where there's a marijuana doctor, and the doctor comes on and saying, hey, are you depressed? Are you feeling anxiety? Are you having chronic pain? You give us a call and we can do a consultation. But my thinking was like, when does this person ever not prescribe marijuana? It's like you go to a normal doctor, and like, well, maybe we'll give you some Xanax, or maybe we'll give you some painkillers, or maybe we'll give you some weed. But if you call a weed doctor, like, he's probably just writing that prescription pretty much every single time. And it's a phone meeting. It's a phone meeting that your consultation. You're not even going in person. So I can't imagine. You just have to say a couple of key words and you're getting that.
Yeah. It's kind of like some of the probably clergy members that aren't necessarily the best at your job, where the solution to everything is just pray. Like, let's not address the problem, just pray.
Just pray on it. God. All right, look, we got to wrap up because we're going to run out of time, and I guess the new updates are cutting us at an hour. They're just kicking us offline. So
Really?
yeah, anything we got like 3 minutes, but I figure we'll start winding down. Anything else you wanted to add?
I'm hoping that the Democrats are going to do something with their power in Congress to like universal background checks, where there's no loopholes, no way around it. Has something like 90% approval in this country. Pass the universal background checks. Restrict like weapon capacity. Increase the waiting period for long rifles. Maybe restrict long rifles. Maybe make long rifles bolt action only. I don't know. Like,
well, I think that I kind of like the idea of the long rifle though, because it's really difficult to get them in and out of places. Like people think you're carrying around a broomstick or something.
Long rifles is just really the term for any rifle that is for any gun that is not a submachine gun.
Okay, well, but either way, it's not a small weapon.
We're not talking about like 1770s muskets that are 8 feet long.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to add?
No, we pretty much covered.
I mean, yeah, I think pretty much everybody. We'll reconvene on this a little bit on the next episode, on Thursday's episode, and also on a little house update. If you can fill us in on what's going on with the house.
Closing's on Friday.
Brilliant. So, all right. So I guess we.
And now I've just built up a huge amount of anxiety about all the things I'm going to have to do in terms of the physical move and also getting contractors to do some of the work that I want to do.
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it Thursday, which is before the close. Last thing I wanted to add is just a PSA about hate, because I think people are very hateful. You read comments on social media, you read a lot of the trash talking on Twitter, even what's going on with Meghan Markle. Like all these people got all this shit they want to talk about. Like hate is really an internal issue. And if you're spreading negativity, you have a major problem. And that's something people need to put in check before they end up shooting places up. And I just, my PSA is really, if you're feeling some hate, you need to do some self-reflection. You may need some therapy. You may need somebody to talk to. But don't bottle that shit up, because it's going to pop at some point, and focus on being positive. It's just, it's a regular exercise. Positive thoughts. Even when you're in a dark place, you think about the good stuff, you plan for the future, you plan for positivity, you start taking action to make yourself better, and life gets better. But don't focus on the negative. It's not gonna bring you anywhere good. On that note, though, we got to wrap. We're hitting the time limit. James, I'll catch up with you Thursday. Really excited for this house closing, so we'll talk more about that, and I will catch up with you next time. Quick TikTok comment. Do I see a Basque flag? You have a Basque flag in the background?
I do.
All right. All right.
Let's talk about that on Thursday. Love the Basque Country. Nothing but good things to say about them.
All right. We'll talk about that later. Adios, guys.
Later.
All right. That concludes the episode on guns. I believe we did an episode on guns earlier last year, but obviously this gun violence persists. It's going to be a serious problem if we don't change things, because it just continues to increase in frequency. So as I mentioned up front, be thankful that you are safe and sound, and I thank you for participating and listening to this podcast. It's some serious stuff. As light as we make of it during the podcast, these are serious issues that our society needs to face, and like I said, if we don't change things, it's probably not getting any better. See you guys next time.
I like PBR. I just got priced out of it.